The main point of this video is to just make you aware of this movie, because it's one of the coolest movies I have seen in a long time. It is full of freaks, and I love a freak. I love a little fucking dude. I love a little wacky fella. Just bizarre. You can make some really interesting looking things using stop motion animation, and especially if you make something that is adjacent to sci-fi or horror, because everything just looks uncanny and wrong. And especially if you're making some top class freaks. Junkhead is a Japanese stop motion animated horror, sci-fi. I hesitate to call it post-apocalyptic because we're not actually sure if an apocalypse has happened or if it's just so far in the future that it's just become dystopian future. It regardless of the plot of this movie is about the freaks. Let's be real. The reason why I watched this movie and the reason why I found out about its existence is because I watched this scene where this little robot guy turns a corner, sees a little creepy face and looks at the creepy face, and the creepy face poops on the ground. And actually, it wasn't a creepy face, it was some freak's bumhole, and it's actually just like an insane centipede fella. The guy who made it with absolutely no prior film experience, which I only knew after watching the film, and it's kind of shocking because the movie actually has a pretty good structure and it it makes sense as much as a film like this could make sense. It had a lot of heart and the ideas were put across clearly, and I didn't really at every point get annoyed at the way the movie was made. So I'm genuinely very impressed by this, and I'm very surprised that I did not hear about it sooner. It's one of those movies where I'm like, where have you been all my life? Kind of reminds me of Mad God, but I would actually argue that this movie is kind of like an accessible version of Mad God. Mad God is just on another level. So the very, very brief synopsis of this movie is that we are in a dystopian future where humans have found they've altered their genes, from what I could tell, altered their genes so that they live forever, or at least for a very, very, very long time, but they've lost the ability to reproduce. So a human guy signs up to be an explorer and a scientist type fella to go and explore the underworld, which is full of these absolute insane mutant freaks called, I want to say they're called Marigans. That's what they're called in the subtitles of the movie. But the movie is not in English, but it's also not in any language. Everyone kind of talks in this like Banjo-Kazooie, weird, breathy, robot-y language. No. This was a very clever choice because it means that if you're doing stop motion animation, you don't need to sync up your mouths to any kind of human language. So you can literally just make them go like this and then put weird sounds on it and then put subtitles on it afterwards, which I think is just genius. I don't know if that was intentional or if that was just how it ended up happening, but so this guy gets sent down in a little pod from the human world into the underworld, and the pod gets seen by these freaks, and the freaks are like, we probably should shoot that as probably a bad thing. So they shoot it down, and this poor little robot human fella gets blown up But then he gets found by, I'm going to call them collectors for now. He gets found by these 3 collectors, and they bring him back to a doctor. And the doctor, with all his freaky gang, go and fix him up into a new body. And this little robot guy, he doesn't remember anything of his task or the human world above him. And the doctor's like, you go out with those collectors because they're going to go out collecting things. But be careful, don't bump your head because that's bad, because you just bumped your head and that's bad. But he goes out. He goes out with these collectors. So he gets lost and he runs into this horrendous monster, which I just talked about. The one with the fake butthole mouth. There's going to be a lot of me finding it very difficult to describe what's going on in this movie. The collector dude save him, and then when they're walking back, they find this little hole in the wall, and the robot guy's, why can't I touch these veins? And the collector dudes are like, don't touch those veins, scary worm's gonna come out. And a scary worm comes out because the veins get touched, and a scary worm eats the robot guy, and it gets spat out because I'm assuming he's artificial and not organic, so the worm is like not tasty. And then when he gets spat out, the robot guy bumps his head on the wall, and he suddenly remembers absolutely everything, and he suddenly remembers part of his human life on the surface, so we switch to this completely different aesthetic where this human guy wakes up and he kind of has like a fake metal plastic suit over his actual face, his human face. So there's like a little scene where he goes and looks at himself in the mirror and he reveals his actual face, and it's just like this dead, cold inside human face. It looks completely unwell, and it's kind of revealed that this is like a dystopian future where there's a plague and people have died out, and then that's how we get revealed that he wanted to go and explore the underworld. So that's kind of like the basic setup. After that happens, it's kind of like a series of events that kind of happen to this human. A lot of the weird freaks that he meets, the weird guys that he meets, kind of assume that he's God. The main thing about this film, the main draw of this film, is its aesthetics, and the way it was made is everything about it is fantastic. It is so gritty and gross, and everything is just covered in trash and grime, and there's a lot of scenes where there's like these liminal hallways where it's just a maze of hallways and absolutely no rhyme or reason why they look like that. It's interesting to me because I can kind of assume that the reason why this movie looks the way it does sometimes is out of like filming practicality. Obviously, when you're filming something stop motion, there is a lot more things to consider than you would if you were doing something in 2D or 3D animation, because you actually have to build the sets. That it made a lot more sense to do just a few little corridors and a few little like long spaces where people could be chased in, or have little walking segments of the characters. All this does is just benefit the movie. It just makes it feel so cramped and claustrophobic and just weird. I really don't want to use this word because it gets thrown around so much, but it feels very liminal. It feels very backroomsy, almost as if this underworld is a old warehouse that humans used to use, and humans have just built on top of it until we've gotten so high above the underworld. It just feels like some kind of corporate desolate nightmare. So these creatures, they call them Maragans, inhabited these spaces, and they have got little villages set up, and there's like a little doctor, obviously we talked about, and there's just like random characters that pop up which kind of feel very world buildy. But our main character Junkhead has to get on an elevator. Some movies would maybe just have him walk onto the elevator, go up, and then that would kind of be it. But there's this whole emphasis on this guy operating the elevator using a motorcycle, and he's like revving the elevator, and it goes up really, really quick and goes down really, really quick, so much so that Junkers like lifts off the floor when it's going down. And it's just small attention to details like that which I love. I think it's great when films give the time to just have that extra pinch of world building. It's just like this random character that is just weird and just does this, and this is what his life is. Doesn't even talk. It's just, that's the guy. I'll just give like a spoiler warning. I still think this movie's good even if you have been spoiled, because I don't think it's much to spoil necessarily. It's more just weird stuff happens. It's more fun to maybe watch it when you don't know what weird stuff is coming. So I recommend watching it. It's actually quite easy to find. There's also another weird scene where Junkers, he ends up being in a village, and these guys who are operating like some kind of machine with this pipe that keeps it about to explode, they send him, Junkers, off to go get mushrooms. And at this point, Junkers has been destroyed and his body has been rebuilt. So he's in this like really janky traditional robot like looking body. It almost looks like something out of Wallace and Gromit. So he gets sent off to go get these mushrooms. You think, oh, okay, he's gonna go collect some kind of food, right? The guy at the village gives him a voucher. He goes there and there's just this freaky dude hanging from the ceiling. He's actually quite polite. He's quite a nice freaky dude, but he's just hanging from the ceiling, and on all sides of the walls it's almost as if someone has turned their back and it's just these people's backs exposed. It's not clear whether they're people behind the wall or if it's just a lump of meat that looks like a back, but there's just these funny little pinar things sticking out, and those are the mushrooms, and they cut them off, and then that's good eating, I guess. I love people's brains. Where do people come up with this kind of thing? Another little kind of theme in the movie which I found quite interesting. It was something that I hadn't seen so viscerally shown. I've watched sci-fi movie concepts which have had people having reproducing as an issue. That's always come up. I think Logan's Run might be an example of this. Don't quote me on that. There's like a thing to do with, it's quite a common post-apocalyptic theme that humans can't reproduce anymore. But in this movie it's really interesting because the humans send our main character Junkers down into the underworld, specifically because they saw a video of this creature, this Marigan, that had a big ol' one of those. Big ol' hanging one of them. Junkers at one point sees this creature, but it's just like so in... What I say is, I mean it literally. It is just so in your face. Like it's just there, and they show it multiple times. But it's quite funny in hindsight because later on in the movie it's found out that it's just his tail. We didn't just see some creature with like the biggest donger ever in a movie. Usually the reproductive stuff in sci-fi is very nebulous, it's very cold, it's very harsh, it's very like scientific, but it feels quite human in this movie. It feels very they are trying their hardest to get back to basics. Junkers has gone on this kind of adventure where his body has been destroyed twice in the film and he's been rebuilt twice. He gets rebuilt, and then all the people in the village and the collectors that originally found him meet up to fight this really, really big Marigan, a really big scary beast. And there's kind of like this whole thing to do with the reproductive plot where one of the villagers is explaining to Junkers that Marigans don't reproduce in the way that he thinks they do, but they sometimes will die and a big tree will grow out of their body and the big tree will bear fruit, and that's how they're born. Kind of go on this quest initially to go and find the tree, but they have to go and kill this big beast first. So it feels like the movie is setting up for a sequel, which I know it is. It's actually meant to come out this year in 2025. So if there's a Junkhead 2 coming out like a week after this video is released, that'll be crazy, but I doubt it. So like the exposition is you must go find this tree that bears fruit, but you can't actually go and get to it unless you go through this beast first. And so all the guys get together and try and fight the beast. Once they kind of fight the beast, the movie kind of ends. I wouldn't say it's unsatisfying because the movie kind of transcends normal movie expectations. So I kind of wasn't expecting this movie to be satisfying. I wasn't expecting really anything, but you can really tell that they are setting up for a sequel where they go and find the tree. Something about this movie I did not expect is that it's very funny. From the few clips I saw of it before I watched it, it seemed quite serious. It seemed very cold, dead, industrial, and it is all of those things. But there's so much heart in it as well. Like, all the characters you meet are all kind of funny stereotypes of humans and how humans would interact with each other. Even though they're just these absolutely insane looking weirdos. That was something that was quite pleasantly surprising when I watched the film. There's this kind of heartbreaking scene that came out of nowhere. We're introduced to a character in a red coat that has a friend that is a more of a freaky looking Marrigan. The little red coat, I hesitate to say girl because the gender is never specified. There's a heartbreaking scene it flips to where you see her as like a little baby trying her hardest to scavenge for food in this very cold, junk-ridden place, and an older person feeds her, and you see her and her weird Marrigan sibling freak that has like these long fingers. You see them grow up together. Her parent dies and she goes and cries in his lap, and out of nowhere it's just like, bruh, these guys were freaks. There's this really funny scene where Junkhead has got a new body, and he can't talk in his new body. So one of the guys is like, he can't talk, but he knows he understands you. So one of the guys is like, raise your left arm, and he does. And he says, raise your right arm, and he does. And he's holding trash in his right arm, and he just drops it on his head by accident. So it's got kind of a lot of very dry, slapsticky humour like that, and there's a lot of space. It gives you a lot of space to laugh about it, which again I wasn't expecting. Just from the visuals of this film, I was not expecting that. There's a bit of like commentary on human existence, and it's very simple, and it's not, I don't know if it's necessary in the movie, but it's kind of nice to hear. It gives the movie a little bit more heart than you're expecting, because obviously the plot is that the humans, they either can't die or they live a very long time. So they've kind of set up a world where life is not very exciting. So this little human that goes down, Junkers, he has a line in the movie where everyone is like, is there a heaven? Does heaven exist? Because he's like a god to them. So they're always asking him, does heaven exist? And he's like, I don't know. I'm not a god, mate. He said he's nearly died many times in the movie, and that's made him feel really alive. So there's kind of like a little bit of a commentary on that kind of dystopian future where humans can live a really long time, there's no fear of death, but what is the purpose of life? You know, it's very on the nose, very heavy-handed, but it works in this film because this film feels quite naive. It feels very childish, but in a good way. It really feels like some dude in 2010. Some dude in 2010 was like, I'm going to make a movie with these funny little guys, and I'm just going to go woo, 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 and it's going to be a good one. I'm really curious to know what the budget is. Hold on. I'm going to Google the budget for this film. Right, I'm not finding any sources for the budget on this film. I'm assuming trying to have a budget on a movie that took 7 years to make is probably quite difficult. I would assume. Is that a thing you keep track of if you're making a movie for that long? And also, it is pretty much made by one guy. It was produced by a different guy, and there's a few like additional voices, mainly just one dude. Something I really enjoyed about the film is that it really kind of felt like a adventure. It felt like I had no idea at any point where this was going. And when he was they were exploring all like the little weird, creepy, weird hallways and stuff, there's just this air of just foreboding and wrong at every point. I don't know if anyone else gets this with stop motion. It has this very tactile feel, and it almost makes me feel nauseous. And not in it makes you feel nauseous, but not in a motion blur kind of way, not in a car sick way. It's like everything is so gritty and gross and physical. Something about it just makes my stomach feel uneasy. And I have a theory for this where if you watch a 2D film, you know that someone drew that on a piece of paper and it's in a 2D plane. And that's kind of it. If you watch a 3D animation, you know someone made that in 3D in a program, but it's still on like a flat screen, like a computer screen. So everything is still very flat and there's nothing that you can actually physically go and touch with either of those things. Whereas when you watch stop motion, you know and you can see that all of those things are 3D things that you could have go and touch, and they feel really real. And sometimes when I go and look at behind the scenes stuff for stop motion, it really surprises me how big some of the models are. Some of those big freaky Marigan dudes are pretty big. I'm sure they do it that way to make them easier to animate, because if they were very small, it'd be a much harder thing to animate. But something about that gives me ick. Like imagining that little freaky guy in person moving the way it does in stop motion in person is so uncanny to me that it makes me feel nauseous. In this case, in this movie's case, very positive, good that is happening, because I really feel like it adds to the movie's atmosphere. The kind of stop motion movies that you don't want that to be happening in is like Wallace and Gromit, cute, nice things. Like I remember the first couple of Wallace and Gromit films made me feel so physically nauseous when I was younger, and they gave me nightmares, even though they're just like kind of nice and wholesome. It's a really interesting way of making a film, and I really feel like stop motion lends itself super well to horror or sci-fi. Yeah, so I think this movie is fabulous. I really hope that the second one comes out soon, but I really, really enjoyed it. I think it was a really great, weird, I'm trying to think of other words, weird, uncanny, strange, interesting, unusual. This movie also has a lot of heart. Is just oozing with charm. Like every character in it, even though they're not very fleshed out, they don't have a ton of backstory, etc. They feel like guys. They feel like little guys. They have a lot of character. You can tell exactly what their kind of motivations are and what type of character that they are when you first see them. But I don't think I will ever forget that first Marigan that we see, the one with the centipede spiky legs and like the weird two-headed body thing. I will never forget the way that looks. Just that scene in of itself is like a nightmare. Everything about it is something that you would see in your dream and wake up and you'd be sweating, you'd feel uncomfortable, you'd feel nauseous, you'd be like, why the fuck did I dream that? Like everything about it is just gross. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm really glad you stuck around and watched this funky little video that I made. If you have any suggestions for movies that I should review or talk about, let me know in the comments. I hope you're having a nice evening or day or morning or 3 a.m, alone time in your bedroom. I understand. Peace out, gamers. Goodbye.